Hello. I feel compelled to make this video today because, well, I made a video the other day and I want to clarify some things about that video. In that video, I was talking about what I see as the causes for antisocial, anti-human, sadistic behavior. And in that video, I defended the idea that profit, in and of itself, isn't such a bad thing. To pursue desires and to pursue power and money and things like that aren't necessarily bad because they are necessary for survival. Pursuing power and pursuing, your means to the end, it's necessary for practically existing, so it's something that has to take place, regardless. And I was arguing that the determining factor that determines whether or not people are willing to hurt others in the name of profit, the determining factor is empathy. However, I do not want to say that profit is therefore good. Profit and pursuing profit is not necessarily in line with the moral thing to do, or the thing that reduces suffering the most. Oftentimes we have to make compromises. We have to do what is economical and practical, and that isn't necessarily the most moral thing. Obviously, if we're considering survival and self-preservation, we are no longer considering empathy as much. We're not considering how our actions affect others because we're worrying about whether or not we can survive. And so I think there is that balance in life. On the one hand, we have to be egotistical and, we have to view the world from our own subjective position and act in accordance with what allows us to survive. And then on the other side of things, it's important for us to be empathetic and see ourselves as part of the whole and to contribute and not simply be parasitical, because this allows us to have self-esteem and to actually feel good about ourselves as fellow human beings. So pursuing power isn't necessarily a good thing, but I do want to clarify that I still believe that a lack of empathy is the main problem in my mind. The problem is psychological, and I don't believe it's inherent. The reason I believe this is because oftentimes when you look throughout history and things like wars happen, the war is only really able to take place because of dehumanization. There's this systematic dehumanization through racism or nationalism. It's very important to put up that border between you and them, because if you believe you're killing people just like you, then it's like you're killing yourself, and it obviously tears you up inside. But if you believe that they're animals and scum and not worthy of our compassion, then doing that becomes possible all of a sudden. Some people say that these wars are fought for money, but I don't really think this is the case. I think to some small degree it's the case, but I want money. I have bills to pay. I have food that I want to eat, not just because it's something I like to do, but because I have to. And so I'm pursuing money, but there's a reason I don't go to war. So I think the first thing we need to do if we want to solve this problem is to take apart and remove these divisive ideas like racism and nationalism and all the dehumanizing ideas that allow lack of empathy to take place. Another big problem that I see is that people are so afraid, and fear just destroys empathy. There is this thing that gets released. Cortisol gets released from your brain when you are afraid, and cortisol shuts down your mirror neurons, and mirror neurons allow for empathy to take place. So literally speaking, chemically speaking, fear shuts down empathy. And I think the reason people are afraid is that they don't know what's going on in the world, and they have a fear of the unknown. And they're always being sold fear by people who are financially invested in fear. And so people are just very afraid, and I think if we enlightened them a little bit and spread knowledge and peaceful philosophy, then people wouldn't be so afraid of the unknown, because there wouldn't be so much unknown. And the next thing I think that is very important, once we help people to become more empathetic by removing barriers like nationalism and racism, and once we help people to become less afraid so they become more empathetic, the final thing we have to do, I think, is we need to make it clear what is the viable solution and what are the false answers in the world. Because there are lots of cults floating around that promise answers to all of our problems, and it's such a diversion. All of people's empathy and all of people's goodwill just gets channeled down these false roads, and it's all a waste. So I think it's very important that we know where our efforts are most useful. Anyway, I've ranted for long enough. Have a good night.